everyone, welcome to the start of week 2 of our online distance learning. So I just want to go over a few things with you guys, and this video might get a little bit longer, but I just want to remind you, you don't have to watch it all at once. So the first thing I'm going to go over is kind of like your to-do list for the week, and then we will kind of then I'll explain, I guess, your PowerPoint. So you might only want to watch the to-do list right now and then later come back and watch the rest of the PowerPoint, which is fine. And you definitely don't need to watch your to-do list part again. You can just skip over that in the future. So let me pull it up here. So let me switch my screens. All right. So here's kind of what your screen looks like right now. So I just kind of typed out for you guys what you're going to do. I will put this on Yammer. I just wanted to wait a little bit so that you guys didn't think it was due this week and we didn't get things lost in the commotion of everything. So your task list. On Monday, what I want you guys to work on is your one-page reflection paper on landscape design. Okay, so I have attached a file that has a little bit more information on it. One page really isn't that much, especially when it's going to be double spaced, Times New Roman. Actually, it might be Arial. I think it's Arial, 12-point font. But double spaced, it's not going to be that long. And that's due on 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday night, okay? Remember, Tuesday night. That way I give you guys a little bit of time to reflect and really think about what you guys are doing and work on that as well. The next thing, you guys are supposed to watch this PowerPoint video. So after we finish going through this, you can watch your PowerPoint video. So like I said, if you want to jump back to this later, go ahead and feel free to do that. After that, I have a worksheet that is Anatomy and Structures worksheet. Once you're done with this worksheet, please email it to me. That's due Thursday at 11:59 p.m. And also, I just want to make a point that just because it's due then doesn't mean you guys have to wait till Thursday to do it. I spread these out a little bit to give you guys some time to work on them because I want you to put some effort into them. And I know you guys have a lot going on in other classes as well, but that doesn't mean hold off until then. And then your fourth thing is to create a drawing or model of a plant and its anatomy. So I've attached a file for more information on that as well. That's due Friday at 11:59 p.m. You can either text or email a picture of this to me so that I can see what you guys did. This is going to take a little bit of time, so don't put it off until Friday, okay? You will need to work on this. I would start earlier. To be honest with you guys, what I would really do would be to complete your worksheet on Wednesday, and then you have Thursday and Friday to work on this. And then the last thing I just wanted to tell you is we're going to meet as a class on Tuesday at 10 a.m. via a Zoom meeting. So all you have to do is copy this link. If for some reason this link doesn't work, you can just go to zoom.com and then click join a meeting and then type in this meeting ID. So I'll just kind of show you. Okay, so this is what my Zoom looks like right now. Let me see here if I just go to www.zoom.com, let's see, and then you click join a meeting up here, then you can put the meeting link. So that would be wrong thing. That would be this ID right down here. You can type that in, join that. We're not going to talk for very long, but I just wanted to go through a few things with you guys and then answer any questions that you might have now that we're kind of getting into the swing of this, and just really be able to connect with you guys and answer questions as well as go over a few things curriculum-wise. So please make sure to schedule some time to join us for that. If you have questions about that, give me a call or email or whatever, and I will answer those to the best of my ability. So let's just go over your landscape design final assessment. Can you guys all see that? Okay, so you're going to need to write a one-page reflection on what you learned during your landscape design unit. I want you to think back to plant ID and the fundamentals of landscape. So you could talk about how in the beginning we learned about how you have to have things balanced. You don't want plants in the corner of your house to be more than 2/3 the way up the side of your house. kind of some of those basic things, and then how you implemented that into your landscape drawing, and then how you would use this in your own life in the future. So maybe you say, well, I hopefully want to be a homeowner someday, and I would like to landscape my yard using some of these techniques, yada, yada, yada. Okay. 12-point font, Arial, double-spaced, and normal margins. Really shouldn't take you that long. It's one page. And just a reminder, again, that's due on Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. Okay, so then I'm going to go through your PowerPoint here. So, structure and anatomy of plants. We kind of are wrapping up this week we were wrapping up our landscape design unit with your reflection. And I want you guys just really put some thought into that and share what you learned, why you thought it was good, everything like that. Okay, with that being said, we are now going to move into our structure and anatomy of plants. So, a plant structure determines its function, okay? Without specific structures, plants wouldn't be able to have some of its functions. So, plant structure is used to identify and classify the plant. The main parts in angiosperms are roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, and seeds. And we're going to break those down here in a little bit. For your worksheet, you guys might want to take a few notes so that it's easier for your worksheet and you don't have to rewatch the video too. But it is up to you what you choose to do that way. So roots, getting down and dirty. So the purpose of roots is to anchor the plant. They're obviously the bottom part in the ground. They look like this over here. And what they really do, other than anchoring the plant into the ground, I mean, that's a huge role itself. They have to be able to hold the plant up. Especially in North Dakota, when we have windstorms or just high winds, they need to be able to keep the plant in the ground. The other thing they do is absorb water and nutrients from the soil. So from our previous units, we know that soil has a lot of benefits as it contains a lot of vital nutrients for plants, as well as there's water in the soil. So it absorbs that water and nutrients and then transports them to the stem. Any ideas how water is transported from the roots to the stem? Okay, we will talk a little bit more about that when we get to the stem part. But just for your guys' knowledge, let's think about the xylem and phloem, okay? Maybe you guys have heard those words before in science, but those are what we really use. So the other thing roots do is store food produced elsewhere in the plant, okay? So we know that plants make their own food. They're producers. So they have to have some place to store some of this energy and food produced, which is also in the roots. So there are a couple different kinds of roots, okay? So there's a taproot system, which are like the dicots, a taproot is a dicot, but it's like your carrots and your dandelions, okay? And then your fibrous roots are more of your grasses and shrubs, so those are your monocots. And then you have storage roots in there, which are orchards and potatoes. So it makes sense that potatoes are storage roots, right? They get big, so things like that. So parts of the root system. There's the main or primary root, and then there's rootlets or secondary roots, and then the last part is root hairs. So they have little root hairs going off around them. So your main or primary roots really kind of help get those nutrients in. Rootlets and secondary roots kind of help anchor it a little bit more. And then your root hairs also absorb some of those nutrients and water. Stems, if we move up the plant. Stems are the major above ground structural plant support. Okay, without a stem, they can't really stand up. So it's the attachment point for flowers, leaves, and fruit. This water and food is distributed through the stem, okay? So like we talked about before, the xylem and phloem is what carries food and nutrients and water up and down through the stem, from the roots through the stem to the leaves to the flowers, whatever. Okay, so the stem is responsible for carrying those nutrients from the ground up to the leaves. It can also produce food, like a cactus, or store its food. And the stems can either be classified as simple, branched, climbing, or creeping. Okay, so there's many different kinds of root of stems there. So like a simple root is pretty much what it sounds like. There's just one main stem going up. Branched, maybe it branches off. Climbing would mean it has to crawl up something, so like a fence or maybe another tree. And then creeping means that the stem spreads out along the ground. Leaves. Okay, so these are kind of like the real workhorses of the plant. Their main function is to make food and other chemicals needed for plant growth and reproduction. So why would leaves be so important for this? Leaves are what? Where photosynthesis occurs, right? They collect that sunlight, they collect water, and then they use that sunlight and energy to make food. So let's look at some of the leaf parts, okay? So this is like a tree leaf right here. So this part here is the blade, okay? This is the broad, thin part of the leaf. This isn't very thick, it's pretty thin, but it's pretty good in size. The petiole is down here. This is the narrow cylindrical part. So this means it's round. Cylindrical means it's round. And you might not always be able to see the petiole in plants. So like in grasses, you don't. Sometimes you do once like grass gets really big, but if you keep your grass mowed and cut, you don't necessarily see the petiole. And then the stipple is the small leaf-like structures at the base of the leaf stalk, and it's not present in all leaves, okay? So, let's just look if we're talking about grasses, the leaf parts. So sheath is the leaf base surrounding the stem. So if you look in here, it's like a grass, you can see how this kind of wraps around the stem. That's the sheath, okay? And then the ligule is the collar-like extension at the top of the sheath found in some grasses, okay? So you can kind of see how it's starting to get that collar right in there. Here you can see it up as well, so it's right along the collar edge before it goes into the leaf. And then the auricles, sorry, that was a way bad pronunciation of that word. Auricles surround the stem at the junction of the blade and sheath on some grasses, okay? So it surrounds the stem right where the sheath and the blade meet. So this is kind of like a good picture of what something you'll almost have to draw. You could draw grass, you could draw a different plant, but in some way you have to like kind of draw your plant or make it out of whatever tools or things you have lying around, and then label these main parts, okay? So like your ligule, your auricles, your sheath, your nodes, okay? And we'll keep talking about those a little bit. Alright, so kinds of leaves. We talked about back when we did our tree that there's different kinds of leaves. So there's the simple leaf, which only has one blade, so like a grass, oak trees, apple trees. Or there's compound, so they have several leaflets. So they may be joined to the petiole or along a central axis, okay? So here's like the petiole for this one, and this one's more of a central axis. But those are compound. They have these different leaflets all on one petiole compared to a simple, which has one leaf on one petiole. So there's other ways to describe and identify leaves. You can describe them by their shape. Maybe they're needle-like, ovate, etc. They could be round, heart-shaped, or you can look at their margin. Okay, so the margin is really like the edge of the leaf, so I'm just going to go back up here. So you can have like smooth, you can have ones that are more serrated, and so they kind of look like jagged, but you can also classify them by their leaf edge. Alright, another way to describe and identify leaves is through looking at their veins. Okay, so veination. you can have different veins in them. So you can have parallel veins. What would be something that you think of that has parallel veins? Right, those would be like your grasses. Things along grasses, monocots, corn, they all typically have your parallel veins. Whereas you can have like pinnate, they can be more netted, palmate. This would be what I would call more so netted. But you can have a lot of different types of veins. These are describing trees. And then you can also describe them by the arrangement of their leaves on the stem. So they could either be alternate, opposite, or whorled. So this is alternate. You see the leaf doesn't necessarily line up with each other on the other side, but it goes like this one, then it alternates to the right-hand side, then it goes back to the left-hand side, right-hand side. Whereas these two are even across, so they're just opposite of each other. Flowers. These are the reproductive parts of angiosperm plants, okay? So many plants have complete flowers with both male and female structures. The male part of the flower is known as the stamen, so those are up here, and that's what produces pollen, okay? So the stamen, you can further divide these parts to look at the reproductive parts of the stamen, but in general, this part right here is called the stamen. And then the three female part is called the pistil, which is up here and receives the pollen, and then that's what eventually forms the seeds. So how would the pollen get from the stamen to the pistil? So typically stamens are higher than the pistils, and then it'll fall onto the pistil. Wind, birds, bees, they can all carry pollen and pollinate as well. Some plants have separate flowers containing only male or female parts. So often these male or female flowers are both found on the same plant, okay? So I want you to think of like a corn stalk, okay? So up here, the male flower, the pollen, is up top, and then it falls down to fertilize the female flower down the ear of corn, okay? So like when corn works or grows, it starts off the ear and it just has a bunch of silk. Sorry, I could not think of that word. It has a bunch of silk at the top of its ear, and then that was what catches the pollen from the top that can either drop down if it's like a little bit windy, birds, insects can pollinate it, and it'll naturally just fall off too. And then it'll fall down onto the ear and pollinate the ear. So you can use different terms to describe flowers. You can have a single flower or a cluster of flowers. You can have a racemose or a cymose. And you can have terminal, so this means flowers are at the end of branches, or axillary, so they're at the junction of a stem or axis and leaf, okay? So let's look at complete flowers. Complete flowers have 4 regular parts. So they have the calyx, which encloses the flower bud. So if you kind of look right down here, this is the part that's the calyx. Then they have the corolla, which are the petals, stamens, which is the male part, and pistil, which is the female part. So a complete flower has to have all 4 of those things: the calyx, corolla, stamens, and pistil. Incomplete flowers lack 1 part. So perfect flowers have stamens and pistils, but they might not have sepals or petals. And imperfect flowers lack stamens or pistils. So you can see there's no stamen or pistil in there. You can see these ones have the stamen and the pistil, but they might not have sepals on them. The incomplete flowers lack the stamen or pistil. So naked flowers have no petals. Apellis flowers have no petals too, okay? So incomplete flowers lack one part. So staminate or male flowers have a stamen but no pistil, and then pistillate or female flowers have a pistil but no stamen. Okay, so you can kind of see this one has a stamen, this one has a pistil, but it doesn't have both. So, flowering characteristics. Monoecious plants. They have both male and female flowers on the same plant, okay? So like your chord. They can do it all themselves. So, mono means one plant, both male and female parts on the plant, okay? So it's just one plant has both male and female parts. Dioecious plants. They have staminate flowers on one plant and pistillate flowers on a different plant. So essentially it means that there's male and female plants. So you better hope that your plants are kind of planted so that you have like a male, female, but you don't have like a row of males and no females, or a row of females with no males, because otherwise your fertilization rate would be lower. So as an example of these would be the holly plant and then Brazilian peppers as well. And polygamous plants have staminate, pistillate, and hermaphrodite or bisexual flowers on the same plant. Okay, so this would be like the red maple. Okay, so flower forms. This is the degree to which floral parts are united. So placement of floral parts on the receptacle, subdivisions of each of the four regular parts, and then the symmetry of flower forms as well. Okay, so fruit. What is the fruit? Fruit is then closes the seed of angiosperm, so it really protects the seed. It means the dispersal of the seed. So it's the ripened seed-bearing plant ovaries. So when you eat fruit, like the apple, you still have the seed inside there. Well, the part that you eat, the apple itself, is what's protecting the seed. So that's the ovary, the ripened seed-bearing plant ovaries around the side. They can be in varied form, size, color, texture, and number. And fruit really helps us aid in identification of plants, right? Fruit is pretty unique, and so it's easier to identify plants based off their fruit. So there's two kinds of fruit, okay? So there's fleshy fruits, which are juicy and bright colored. And then there's dry fruits, which are generally gray, brown, or another dull color. So, your fleshy fruits include like drupe and stone fruit, berries, pepo, pomegranates, aggregate, and then other forms of multiple fruits as well, so grapes. So I would say fleshy fruits are more the fruits that you typically think of, whereas dry fruits are generally thin and dry ovary wall, so the food is largely confined to the seeds. So this would be a lot of like your nuts that we think of. So seeds can start it all over again. So they can disperse on the new plant. They protect from injury and drying. They provide some food until the young plant can make it on its own. And they contain an outer wall and an inner embryo. So seed characteristics are widely different, right? From dust-like orchard seeds to huge avocado seeds. We can have seeds that are like just vastly different in their size. They can be varied in color, texture, longevity, and how they're dispersed, as well as how much food they contain. So a concentrated food supply is valuable for food as humans and as animals, okay? So by using this fruit or seeds, we get a food supply for ourselves, but it also provides a food supply for the new plant that's starting until it's able to like grow and produce and photosynthesize its own food. All right, so let's look at plant anatomy a little bit. So just what parts are present in plants and how do they function? So by understanding crop plant growth, agriculturalists can maximize or optimize crop and plant growth and or cropping potential. So an understanding of plant growth begins with understanding the plant anatomy, including cells, tissues, and organs. Okay. So the cell is the basic unit of life. The cell is the most basic structural and physiological unit of plants, and this is where a lot of chemical reactions take place. We know that plant cells differ from animal cells. So plant cells have vacuoles, cell walls, and chloroplasts, whereas plant cells also lack the lysomes, centrioles, pseudopods, and flagella or cilia. Okay, so we know that plant and animal cells are different. Plant cells are a little bit more structured with their cell walls. And then the chloroplast is also what makes the plants look green. That's available in there. I'm sure you guys have all had biology and had to really study the differences between plant and animal cells. So, structures of a plant cell. Cell wall, the plasma membrane, protoplasts, and organelles. Okay, so let's look at those a little bit. So how plants grow. Plants grow by cell division, which is mitosis, right? So this means one cell divides into two cells. Genetic material is exactly duplicated, okay? So you're not combining like a male and female through meiosis, you're just using mitosis. So it's just cell division. And so the genetic material that's in there is exactly replicated into each cell. So each parent cell divides to become genetically identical to its daughter cells, okay? And this process repeats so many times. So if you have one cell that divides into two cells, those two cells each divide, so then you have 4 cells, those 4 cells each divide, then you have 8 cells, those 8 cells each divide, then you have 16, those 16 each divide, so then you have 32, those 32 each divide, so you have 64, 64 divides, so you have 128, okay, and so on and so forth. And so it actually happens really fast that those cells are multiplying through mitosis like that. So, tissues. These are large groups of organized cells of similar structure which perform specific functions for the plant. So it could be, there's tissues like the root tissue, stem tissues, leaf tissues, okay? There are 2 general types of tissues in the plant, which include the meristematic and then the permanent, okay? And we're going to look at the meristematic here. So, meristematic tissues contain actively dividing cells to form new tissues. So this is found in roots and shoot tips at nodes and in the cambium of plants, okay? So they contain actively dividing cells. So that means they're continually growing. So in other words, they're like the part that you will see that grows. So it's found at the root and then at shoot tips at nodes. So nodes are like in between sections of a stem. So they will keep growing the stem. So this is kind of essentially what makes this grow larger. Permanent tissues are tissues that are uniform. So their complex permanent tissues include conductive tissues that move water and solutes throughout the plant, okay? So this would be more so on the inside, like you have permanent tissues in just the trunk of a tree. All right. So primary plant organs, roots, stems, and leaves are what you could call the primary plant organs. We know that these are some of the main parts of the plant, and so we can look at how they function as organs. So the structure of primary roots. They may include taproot or a mass of similar sized branches, okay? So they penetrate the soil by cell division. So mitosis happens, that root is digging deeper and deeper into the soil. And then the root hairs absorb water and nutrients. The structure of the primary stem. So if you think back to what we talked about earlier, these are thick walled cells that provide support, okay? So they have an internal water pressure, which is turgor, which is what really keeps the plants like rigid and gives them their shape, I guess. So they have to have that internal water pressure so that those cells are full and the plant doesn't just like weep over. And we will go into that a little bit more when we talk about the role of water next week. The stems also transport water, minerals, and manufactured food as well. So they take your water and minerals from the soil and they spread it to the rest of the plant. They take energy from photosynthesis from the leaves down to the roots so that they can have energy to divide in mitosis and grow and further expand those roots as well. The structure of leaves. These are flat, broad, thin structure for light interception or penetration. Okay, they reduce light by vertical orientation, thickness, hairs, or a reflective surface. They have small pores called the stomata on the underside of the leaf that take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. So they have two cell layers. They have the upper layer, which is for photosynthesis, and then the lower layer is spongy tissue, and that's where the stomata is, and they really take in carbon dioxide and release your oxygen. Okay, so two things to think about there. And then there's two kinds of growth. So there's primary, which is a young herbaceous growth and shoots and roots, and then there's secondary growth, which is increased girth and woody tissues. So as things get older, they move from primary growth to secondary growth. So like old trees typically have a lot of secondary growth happening on. You're adding that woody tissue, because if you think of like a little tree when it first starts out, it's pretty whimsy and not super rigid, like it's flexible and can break and bend easily. And then as it grows, it gains more like substantial, more width or more structure to it, that it like becomes harder. You can't bend it as easy. It has more woody textures. Some plants really only exhibit primary growth, so they'll never really get that woody texture to them. But I want you guys to think about like even like a corn plant or a soybean plant. Even though it's like they start off as primary, they're pretty delicate when they first come up, and then by the time that you harvest them and they're dried down, those stalks are kind of like they have more of that woody tissue in them. They're not necessarily as whimsical as a primary. So that's kind of what our structures and anatomy is as far as that goes. So let's just look at your worksheet here real quick. This is kind of your worksheet. You have to go through and answer these questions. 20 questions, shouldn't be that hard. You can type right in this document. Don't worry about printing it. You can just type your answers. So blank are plants that produce seeds enclosed in a fruit. What would the answer be? Angio. Gotta spell it right. Angiosperm. You can go ahead and use that. Then just make sure that you highlight this and put it in red so that I know that I can easily find your answers, okay? Don't worry about if it like makes the page longer or anything like that. And then if you would, I don't care so much about the date, but make sure you really put your name up here so that I can see who has, or like I can keep your guys straight. All right, and then okay, and so then this is your plant parts poster, okay? So objective, you have to create a poster of a plant and label the 6 main parts of the plant as well as describe its functions. So you may pick any crop or plant and are welcome to use the internet if you need more information. You have multiple options for this. You can either draw the plant or use whatever you want. You could use clay, you could use Play-Doh, you could use string to make a 3D version of a plant, and then you could use information. I'm not going to make you print it off because I know probably a lot of you don't have printers. Just write your information beside the board or beside that neatly, okay? So describe the root system, so you have to like show the root system and then describe it. So if it's a taproot, if it's a fibrous root, which are the anchor roots, primary roots, does it have root hair on it, okay? So describe that and describe what it does. So the root system's purpose is to absorb water and nutrients from the soil as well as anchor the plant in the ground. Okay, you need to have that described on there. I want to see the stem system with nodes, internodes, accurate leaf system with veins, your flower fruit system with appropriate parts, and then labels of the functions for each part. And just make it creative, okay? You can either take a picture of this and text it to me or email it to me. And if you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask, okay? So, here, hang on a second. So I guess with that, that kind of wraps up what you guys have due for the week. Please do not hesitate to get a hold of me if you have questions. I'm here for your guys's, like, you guys can pick my brain, use my knowledge, whatever you need, okay? I'm here to help you. If you have questions at all at any time, don't be afraid to get a hold of me. With that, have a great weekend, or a great week, I guess, and then I don't know when I'll see you again. Hopefully I'll see you on the Zoom meeting.